and welcome to this Poetics of Home event. And I'm delighted today to introduce Annie Fearn, who will be chairing and moderating the discussion. Annie recently graduated from the Oxford University, where she was president of the Poetry Society. Her poetry and fiction appear in Poetry London, PN Review, and the London Magazine, among others. Her pamphlet, Wound Song, was published by Verve Press in June 2021. So I get to hand over to Annie now. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm really excited to see you all today. And we've got three fantastic poets reading for us. First, Nicholas Wong will be reading. He's the author of Crevice, published by Kaya Press in 2015, which won the Lander Literary Prize for Gay Poetry. And his new book, Besiege Me, is out with Naomi Press this year. He also received the Australian Book Review's Peter Porter Poetry Prize, and his translations appear in Ninth Letter, Georgia Review, Washington Square Review, the Colorado Review, and Poetry Northwest, among others. Reading after him will be Lady Red Ego. She's a Chinese-British lesbian writer who writes about Into the Seas and has published work in lots of acclaimed anthologies, including We Were Always Here by UWPS, Crossing Lines with Broken Sleep Books, and in issue 43 of The Dark Horse. Her first pamphlet, The Red Ego, was published in 2019 with Wild Press Books, and her second pamphlet was published last year by Broken Sleep Books. And finally, we have Jinhao Xie reading for us. They were born in Chengdu, and their poetry touches on culture, selfhood, and the everyday. Their work has appeared in Poetry very recently, and Poetry Review, Gutter Magazine, Harana Bath Bag, and Spilled Milk Magazine, among others. And a poem, Hello Ni Hao, was anthologized in Slam. You're going to want to hear this, which was edited by Nikita Gill. And their visual poems have also been included in Instagram poems every day by National Poetry Library. So we've got a fantastic lineup, and I'm really pleased to hand over to Nick, I think, for the first reading.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Rosa Fiery. Thank you, Jenny, actually, for organizing this event. I think it's very meaningful because it has like numerous events, numerous fantastic poets from Asia, from Hong Kong, from the UK, talking about different things, and poetry, intensively for a number of days as well. So I'm going to read some poems. I hope they are relevant to today's topic, mapping of desire. I will start with some poems from my latest collection called Besiege Me, about my father and my sexuality, and then I will end my session with two translated poems, because I have been translating poetry written by my Taiwanese writer, poet, editor friend called Shen Ziping, from the Taiwanese Mandarin these days. So some of them were accepted, and I felt it's actually nice to include Taiwanese poets in my session as well, so that my session is not entirely me. So the first poem I'm going to read has a super long title from my collection, Besiege Me. It is written about my father, who actually who had to go to hospital because of some lung issues many years ago. Many book reviewers mistook that he was dying, but he actually was not. He's still out there in the sitting room cooking right now. But the interesting thing is, there was a moment that I saw him be himself in a very weak, vulnerable situation, in a very weak, vulnerable condition, and that was somehow fascinating to me, because he was just inexpressive masculine figure, the provider for the family for a very long time. And there was a time I felt that he was actually a child, when he was in the hospital bed, waiting for treatment. So I wrote some poems about that in my latest collection. So the poem title is I swiped my Amex to cover my father's treatment for a virus in his lung I don't know how to pronounce. And obviously it's about me, imagining me trying to tell him that I'm gay. But then, it's an unspeakable subject. So in the actual poem, the word gay is replaced by a blank. So when I'm reading a poem, I would just pause a little bit. And then it's actually that word. At the hospital, we have become entrepreneurs of standing around. My head spinning like an agitator. My point being, in comparison, you are a black hole. My nest can be spoken like my salary. We should, but can't, talk about my nights that involve many limbs. I think, thoughts, play, chess, walk, dogs. I'm bored and proud, you say. Even then, I knew you knew it. When the virus stimpled your lungs, I imagined you asking me why I read Sartre. I imagined you saying you aren't like me. True, my shadow ruffles on your burdock-reeking torso, and my lungs aren't shadowed, computed, invoiced, item by item, then saved and paid for, then turned into redeemable mileage, main and dear fences. I pretend feel exotic in numerous selfies to pay the filial debts of my skin. You remain beside me like a receipt. Years later, will someone say true when I say what you have just said, without leaving me alone to feel the being and depletion of being? The second poem is called Invitation. It also comes from Beseech Me. I wrote, this is a kind of prose poem. This is a prose poem, but I wrote it imagining me trying to get married in Taiwan with a guy, and trying to extend the invitation in the form of a letter to my father. So you can find, for those who are familiar with Taiwanese pop culture, you'll find numerous Taiwanese references in the poem. And I decided to keep the references in Chinese characters in the poem instead of transliterating the name into English, because I think it's pointless to do that. So I kind of retained the actual names of those people, references, song names, song titles in the poem. It's called Invitation. Invitation. If I tell you the floral arch is my body and whose hands they are, would you come to the wedding? I can't explain my choice or why there are excitement bright nipples on the arch. You've met him. His hands are sometimes borders, sometimes the world to me. I'm scared of carrying on because I know exactly when the day breaks. I know what you mean by knowing less is a blessing. I want you to know more. He still kneels beside me until a word places itself in my heart. It's my heart that knows when the day breaks. The day watches him pause and he watches me weigh apologies. I am scared. We spent the past few months measuring confessions and secrets. The world is an extension cord. You didn't tell me each lover is born with a sweet tooth, and they fold their sadness inwards. You didn't tell me a wedding is to undo a reasonable split. Would you come? We'll invite Tong Yiyang, Zhang Guan'er, and our mothers. Would you still come if we have a fast food theme for the catering? Jollibee, McNuggets, and other Lynchon shit, so the guests can't register the contrast of their first and second plates. I can't explain my choice. I once spread myself as wide as possible to increase the catchment area for falling in love. I can't explain. When I met him, he cooked for me. We're thinking of inviting Amu and going live on Instagram, #RemainDaising, #soundbite. Are you scared? We can leave you out of the frame, but bring an extension cord to our wedding. You've met him, but I didn't tell you our late supper at Xiu Lei Ji or that Taipei rebuilt us. I didn't tell you we didn't need to bear the strength of each passing eye while holding hands in Yanoilo. Did I scare you? Still, bring an extension cord. I can't explain my choice. I no longer want my life empty like the space inside a highball glass. With him, I want to see a hive of light coiling and hear its tingling sound. With him, I know how I feel and want to feel the knowing. Is the velocity of these ones too much? You can't explain my choice either. Sometimes it's hurtful to see we are barefaced. Sometimes people like us dress up as clowns to say hello to strangers. I wish you told me what drives a wedding. An act of faith? I wish you told me intimacy could be a floral arch just installed. Are you scared if I'm not? What if I tell you I want you to be there? Say yes. I'll stop retelling my story so carefully. I promise. Since there's a poem about imagining an imaginary wedding and an imaginary invitation to my father, so the third poem is going to be my partner, my boyfriend. It's called Self-Portrait. Wait, let me put a PDF. I forgot the title. Distracting boyfriend. Self-portrait as my boyfriend's Rolex. He wanted to be thought as all that's left and left with more prep and monologues of strange proteins. Your first date with them, looking back, would your face change if you already knew? Then in his car, seats reclined, you kissed the curve of his thumb, sniffed his hair scented with work. He told you how he raged at the hospital triage. Cheap fucks took my watch. How he became a human sugar cube in math parties. You felt like windshield wipers made to clear glass underwater. He said, it's not like I wanted it. It took your hand some time to touch his trembling wrist, rub my crystal face, admit it, you like it too. That bare erotics of denial. Last poem, not last poem. The next poem is actually the last poem from my book called Apologia of the Besieged City. So I guess what I'm trying to do in Besiege Me is to not separate my sexuality or my gayness or queerness with how I have seen Hong Kong develop since 2019. So so I thought, why not write write an erotic poem about making out with the city. So this is the last poem from the book. Some people love like they believe the romantic folklore about the moon, but they love too literally from inside the spacesuit. Or they love to feel like a shell put back onto the sand. They love the shoreline without loving to trudge back up to the heartland. They love sleeping over. In the dark, they love crazing my chest with defeat. Imagine the vibe in bed. Imagine how hard it is for me to love them back. They are blind puppies when we fuck. They wriggle around to find an available nipple to nurse. They love dirty talk. They love asking for permission to lash out. They love doing it when I moan. They love to hear sure. They love me as much as they love the spasms inside electric tanker cups. They love bathing me afterwards. It's pretty, they know. Their terror lathering along my calves. so tangible and white. And then I'll wrap my part with two translated poems originally written by Sun Ziping. For those who know Mandarin or who can read Chinese, I highly recommend his two. He has numerous poetry collections, but I've been intensely translating poems from two books called, one is called 你不在哪兒, 你不在哪兒, and 山地饅頭, 心底饅頭, which is a pun, to sentimental, the English word. So the first poem written by Sun Ziping is called Happiness is Very Hard, Is It? Happiness is very hard, is it? If pain secretly visits and sleeps over in a zigzagging night, the body, like a habit-driven curve, will become bitter and stiff at the right time, or it will try to lie flat like a map. Everyone can move on, eyes closed, not saying a word. Solitude looks for the commanding height of the third castle in the forest. Morality and its reverse reveals to be folded. Happiness is very hard, is it? The teeth are as stubborn as the weather. A plane hastily crushes the clouds. Feelings gently peel off and become pictograms in private. The spine is an unrehearsed sentence pattern. The ear secretly delivers someone's echo, and a round of conclusive applause. One or two kinds of worries have yet been shouted out. Say again. One or two kinds of worries have yet been shouted out. Say again. Wait, so I saw messages in the chat. Yeah, let me just copy and paste his name in the chat. So it'll be easy for the audience here to track him down, maybe. And then, when it's April's turn to read, I would type his Chinese name, So the last poem I'm going to read is also by Ziping. It's called Swallowing Thorns. 1. Unfamiliar names are a kind of precepts. I swallow thorns every day and keep ovulating. At night, I am straightened over on an aisle. My ears free-spirited. My body fed up with loitering in streets. Silence is a new sound. I practice listening by staying in line. An electronic note pauses on the third bar. A phantom train is arriving. The train conductor broadcasts something nostalgic. In the cold air, magnetic gold floats. The devil lurking at the corner of eye makes a wish. Let the pain blossom in the throat, like all loves on the verge of extinction. 2. After the food has found its swallower, please explain the body's phantoms one by one. A time factory manufactures clean movie sets. A devil seduces the wrong commands. A bleeding hand touches the piano keys against the rule. Summer summons for a forest in light drizzles. Before all these, sunlight has patrolled our eyes. Language has experienced many magnificent leaps to end an evil plot in hiding. Since then, the morning blue caresses fatigued windows. The secrets that took place in the dark finally close their eyes to adopt an infantile hush. Thank you. That's my part. I hope you enjoyed the poems and also the translations.
Absolutely, thank you for that. I was wondering with the translations, when you're translating other people's quite intimate poems, how do you maintain that faithfulness, their original intention, whilst kind of
I
also
think I
being
think
tender with the translation, I guess.
yeah, I you know what, I've already given up the want to retain the original intention, especially with Jipin's poems. He is very playful in terms of diction. He there's a there are a lot of puns, Mandarin puns in his poems, which are impossible to translate, and he also often does this funny tricks about fucking up the subject, verb, and noun collocation. So he had very weird verb noun collocations. If I literally translate that collocation into English, it would just read as bad translation for the translators. So I'm still navigating my way. It's not that I am commissioned to translate him or anything like that, but he's a friend. I like his poems. Every summer I simply translate him as a kind of exercise that I do when I'm off from campus. I'm teaching myself how to translate. But lately, I'm on his more difficult poems. I've taken more risky approaches to sort of creatively translate the work. Sometimes I even break his form apart, transforming the poem into couplets, instead of like one stanza, things like that. So I'm glad that he's quite open to these suggestions. He's not like, trying to dictate, how his works will be translated. He's quite nice to work with. He's super liberal. He doesn't really care. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds really lovely.
Thank you.
Should we pass on to April, Lady Red Ego, who will be reading for us next?
Hi. Nicholas, that was amazing. Thank you so much for reading for us. That was phenomenal. Congratulations on congratulations on your book. Can you tell us where we can buy it from? Maybe you can put it in the chat. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here and to be a part of this. This event means a lot to me, I think, for a lot of us, but like I definitely feel like growing up in Scotland, being gay and Chinese is like quite a lonely experience. I just want to thank you all for this like moment of community. I'm not really one for long introductions, so I'll just get into the poems. I wrote this because I love you. Yes, it seems a strikingly feminine phrase. How even the hovering heat of my palm over your shoulder is reminiscent of some vague, absent thing. Abstraction. A way to talk about what we need to talk about without quotation. The categorization of tenderness into rows, carefully tilled and sowed. Then the scythe. It seems masculine to bring meaning home. Masculine as in having access to fields and not wondering where good food comes from. Masculine as in arriving without leaving. Having failed at producing someone to conquer me, I must conquer myself and be conquered by the gentle lure of the warm stove, the sifting of wine into pitcher, conquered by the ambiguous tenderness you have for me, as if I was your own blood, as if you are also conquered by the simple statement on the table between us. Race relations. I can't make you care. When I saw the long line of your side profile, I knew I couldn't make you. North winds dash themselves to pieces on your nose bridge. On my ridges perched a temple. It lit a wish for my people. Some god carried love away on the cross of a kite. Your cold lips, blue and white, the indifferent frostbite. Mooncake punctuated the night. Sometimes I feel like Chang'e, swallowing a mortal elixir, lest some man breaks and enters. This poem is called Yocasta. I think that's how it's pronounced. And she is historically the mother of Oedipus, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Yeah. Have you ever made bread? Right from the field, wheat milled into fine sand, folded back and ground again. That is how I hate you. My full weight on the pestle, the herbal circle borne by the mortar. Can ceramic hold me? This is your medicine, after all. This is productive violence. Hardworking. I feel the suffering across my shoulders. Still, there is heat to be applied. Like a child, he cannot help his ailment. So, like a child, he will open his swallowed throat and take this bitter remedy, as I have taken false apologies. Take it. He knows it was no mistake. This hate was blessed in the sun. It was harvested. It was raised with maternal instincts. God gave me this hate, as did you, when you tried to fuck me like every other man. You are not my son. With sons like you around, who needs poison? This poem is called Polyphemus, and he is one of the Cyclops that Odysseus encounters on his journey home. Polyphemus. Don't you tire of wordplay? It'll be the death of me. Tell me, why is it worse to eat the flesh of a white-skinned man than that of a sheep? Who follows and who is the wolf that leads? He stuffs me full of lies until I cry his name. Odysseus. I am coming for you. I am coming home. Home is the name of the animal that I slaughter and bleed out. Sappho. The magic came again. It visited my fingertips. Bed death, la petite. The female prefix, a default for other women to lay beneath. I have lied. I have waited. You are not a man, too refined, the soft jut of your chin, the narrow bone of your hip. I have told them other names you go by, titles like Violet and Mr. and Achilles. Sir, there is no need to obscure your body. His breast fills my mouth like a wine cup about to spill. I hold my liquor the same way I hold conversation, the anticipation of setup, punchline, the white milk bathing the black outline. Subtext. My heart, you have heard my language. Aphrodite, a response to Sappho. Yes, I was tomboyish, climbing trees, scraping knees. Yes, they put me in a dress. I remember my school teacher bending over my desk, teaching me alphabets. Now I must speak. Sweetheart, will you weave baskets of nonce taxonomies so that I may have a word for this hot wet love. A Thousand Jumpers. This is a poem about when I was staying in Dundee with my partner, who is Scottish and white, and it's about using the frame of an interracial relationship to explore what I would consider my broader interracial relationship with the country as a whole. You must love me now. It is true, it has happened. We are on a desert island, stranded. Love is not a boat. It will not take you to the new world. Vancouver looks like Scotland. Korea looks like China. I look like I wasn't born in England, Leeds. Darling, if this were 100 years ago, you would be outcast for loving me. My identity is somewhere between seas. On the overnight plane, I watch Mongolia stretch out forever. I cannot say we would be together in any reality, or eternity, or even in the future, that slim silhouetted entry. I cannot say it. I am afraid that you will find Sienese food too spicy, that the humidity will get to you. I wear 1,000 jumpers in wintry Dundee, run the heating bill into Aberdeen. Halfway through sex, I make you put the covers on me. Halfway through love, I make you learn Chinese. Polyphemus, Part 2. Are you there? Do you hear me? Father, did you birth me? How did my mother bear it? My body, my bones, my skull, which I now know was too giant to fit through a nymph's pelvis. Did she want it? You or I, the white globe of life, mine, the pupil, the tunnel into a sun, not her species, not yours, not the oceans. Who did it? Who carried me from pederasty to heterosexuality, from sea to Sicily, and left me there? Why? Sometimes I think I understand him, my little colonizer, always taking the long way around to his wife. These waters make promises. This is my second to last poem, and it's called Putonghua. Learning to read Chinese was like having wine poured into my half cup, rich and bodied red, a shallow siphon from bottle into hollow, and poured again. My yawning half-whiteness, a half-truth drinking deep, bellied. Some roads lead nowhere. Someone drags their heels, turns around. Where do you come from? In the mirror, who brought you to this silver river? Who told you that you were close enough? Tell me, how can I get closer to my own body? And the wine raced hot through my Asian kidneys, left rashes and skid marks, bent my head like low-hanging fruit dangling over student hall toilets. A depth siphoned from stomach into basin, the bad Chinese takeaway that I know is bad but that I always order again. You did this to yourself. Yes, I should have taken the initiative to immigrate my own fetus. I should have never come home. The embarrassing ordeal of being born in England, Leeds, of not being able to read, of not dating within my race. Maybe I should have tried harder, finished my homework, stitched together a man who was half everything I am, only the problem is that would still leave me with 2 men too many. The problem is I don't have seams. The problem is I can't read. The problem is I was already in love with you, my butch supermodel, in my first language. This is my very last poem. Thank you for all being patient. And it's called Sappho Again, Part 2. At an asking of little to nothing, I wrote this for you. Early morning, land dawning, almost like home. If home could perch on your shoulder like a familiar. If home could rise out of the sea. Ithaca, lost to history. Odyssey, lost to English. I can understand men having moved my own hand until ink fragmented itself mosaic of bad translations and ego. I can understand. Remember, Polyphemus, that even you are blessed to die in your native country. Some of us smear ash across the atlas, our shadows wrung out, our love wiped out. Will you cross blank latitudes for sheer longitude? Will you pinpoint your heart? When angels emerge from their pearl births, as they will, as they must, will you be there in a little boat, docking close? Thank you very much.
Thank you. You have the most lovely reading voice. It's so soothing and like lovely. Yeah, I just wanted to ask you about kind of how you approach like fragmentation in your work about identity and stuff. Is definitely in my own, I think, even if it's not conscious, I feel kind of torn between my British and Chinese identity, like and being queer, and then kind of not really finding British Chinese elders to kind of draw on, so kind of having to create my own language. Like, how do you feel about that? Do you intentionally discuss it in your own work?
Yeah, definitely. I know, I think that's like a huge thing because it's like you're kind of seen as either one minority group or another, and it's very hard to navigate that. And I think also just being part of any diaspora, it's like you will never be enough of either identity culturally. Yeah. I think I didn't used to address it intentionally, but I do think it came out in my work, and now I really like to, I think partly how I deal with it is by kind of doing these rewritings of these historical figures and kind of giving them that, because I think it makes it easier for the reader to understand the complexity of the story because they already have an established narrative for like characters like Sappho and Odysseus. Like there's a very strong established narrative, so it's easier to write against that narrative than it is to like just invent the narrative yourself. And I think
you're almost rewriting your own creation there.
Yeah, I love rewritings. Yeah, but I think it is also just true to like, especially like the queer Chinese experience, the queer Asian experience, honestly, as a whole, like your very existence is a rewriting of a narrative. So you have to get comfortable in that fragmentation and just learn to use the gaps to your advantage, I think.
It's a really lovely response. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll pass on to Jinhao.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Like Nicholas and Lady Ready Go, you both just, oh my gosh. I just can't wait to read more of your poems. Obviously, you know, Nicholas got books coming out and Lady Ready Go also got 2 pamphlets, I think, right? And yeah, I'm just gonna, okay. I think I'm gonna follow the tradition that Nicholas sort of carried out, like bringing bodies in a space where they're not present. So I'm gonna start reading something I've written down in case I stutter. So in the light of Sarah Everard's murder and the murder of Sabina Nessa, an old Asian woman harassed and felt unsafe during this pandemic and beyond, and all the trans women, particularly Black trans women, killed for simply being women. I'm here today in solidarity to sisterhood. And I will open my reading with a poem attributed to my mother, more specifically, the girl still lives in her, by extension, in me too. The first poem is called Ode to Girl. Ode to Girl 1. A girl, bruised plum, winter bud, yearning, and girl screams, glowing curl on her left cheek is her father's fist. And this isn't about love, but many silenced girls. A girl born is a boy lost, and her father's grief wrapped in his lit tobacco stick. Her eyes could be treasures if a boy. Her face could be the sun if a boy. Her shoulders could be a soldier if a boy. In the name of tradition, her father plunges in the heart of violence and pulls out a dagger blooded in history, stabs the girl in the back, a one-winged dove she's made to be. 2. And tonight, the rain resembles a girl's face, tears up the night's heavy body, pieces of damp cloth. The yellow dress she stole from his sister, mocking tonight's moon. There, a blue shadow of her father, digging. I will love you, says the girl to the moon, when you are sick or when you're no longer full of hurt. Say you love me too one day. I will visit you with my beloved. And the wind slaps the girl like her mother. Stupid girl, leave now, go, and be gone. 3. The girl swallows the night dipped in wind. The girl becomes the night. The girl rides on the donkey's back of loneliness. The girl is free, meaning homeless, and anywhere could be her home. The girl is strong. The girl is stronger than men. The girl survives the way the only women can in a city that hunts girls for pleasures. The girl comes home, her rag flat. The girl rests in a corner. Her exhaust from work curls up into a bed. The girl unties her hair, thick, like her mother's voice, sings herself asleep. Awalahun, awalahun, yagdishmen asman katalahun. A song she learned off the street that day. Had she found out the meaning of the lyrics, she would know it was about her, but she would never. 2 stray dogs fighting for a half-eaten moon, and the city barks. Her name, her father's cusses. Zanzile, Zanzile, Zanzile. 4. A name is always given and spoken at the mercy of others' tongues. The girl surrenders nothing of herself. She's her own person now. A girl, a woman, a mother in the same body at the same time, and they never meet. When the girl is scared of the dark, woman lights up candles of stars, builds the girl a house in her heart. The house is a shrine, and Buddha is a mud-faced woman. The girl prays when she falls in love. Love is always sharp and carves every man into her father. 3 is a magical number. A mother is a woman's woman. Mother wants a child and another. Every child is hers, even if they weren't born alive. Mother thinks abortion is a measure of a freedom. Birth, another. Mother bears a child strong like her. Mother loves the child so much, she births her a boy's body in this version of her life. Mother mothers the girl in the cradle of her arms, whispers, "This is my only magic to stop the history repeating himself." 5. Mother's body is a portal that travels into an alternative universe, a no-man land where girls are loved as girls, boys with breast envy, uterus is praised in the shape of every building, and a girl born in a boy's body, still a girl. The girl writes about her mother. The story goes, Once, here was a girl. She went missing in the middle of the night. Her shadow was found in every inch of the city, a businesswoman she made of herself, a mother she chose to become. She birthed a girl with a penis. Every penis, a woman, a woman, a woman. I didn't know. I guess me reading out loud that much. So I was thinking about the queer poetics. It's about existence, about survival. How does one write oneself into existence when the world outside denies or is unaware of possibility for beauty? Such quests may be futile, but poetry is my only refuge, where language is made fluid and uncertain. So I'm going to share my next poem with you. It's related to my relation to my body and sort of myth making. I wake up and see a girl in the mirror. Say, a woundless daughter like me is dangerous. Teach me about reconciliation and the body that is given. Say, my eyes are brown because they are riverless. Show me how to drown if my body holds no water. Some days, I want to mourn the softness of my breasts just because. And I let strange men come into me and say, what a good girl. Tell me all there is about rivers and this phantom woman, the governor of the moon, and thus the river. Once I swam in a river on a moonless night, and my mother was the moon thief, the river. There was a daughter who lived until 9 months old, and I was a hound that ravished her into a shadow, leaving my mother's body an eclipse. When I asked her, why was I born? My mother unbuttons her tight jeans and shows me her deflated moon, her stretched river, says, here, ask me to dip my hands into this glistening river of hers. And I feel it, its ridged surface, and I hear the girl singing, flooding my bones. My next poem is about sort of writing against the normal poetics about queer desires. And I think queer desire to me is also about a desire reaching for a familial connection too. It isn't always about romantic pursuit. So this is my poem called Moonlight. In my dream, I hold hands with my brother. We're both boys. He looks at me through his thick lashes, a squint. 3 years of time travel between him and me. We're blue boys. He looks like my future and I'm his past. 3 years, time holds us together in summer, and it's always summer in my dream. My future and his past are nothing but a smudge. He's free from worry glint of summer, always summer when I dream of him. We laugh, we blow up cowpat in Dad's village, a punch. A smudge is his free from worry glint, as if graphite glides past his cheeks. Look how our laughter blooms in Dad's punch. I stand by him, hold on to his soft hand, graphite jewels wind blowing past our cheeks. I look at him through our thick lashes. Our shoulders barely touch, tiny hand in tiny hand. And there it is, where my brother's stubborn heart beats. I look through him, behind his thick curtains of lashes. We're both boys for once, looking ahead. His stubborn heart laughs with mine so loud. I wake up, and there, my brother is the moon watching over me. Lastly, I will finish my reading with this new poem I wrote recently, and it is where I'm heading towards a sort of joy, if such luxury is possible. It's called Chrysanthemum, Ju. I lost my virginity in the bathtub to my brother's electric toothbrush. Haha. But that didn't count because my body was made for war and war only. It was chrysanthemum season then. I lost something. The barren window and sky was gray as sparrow's belly. It was around 3 p.m., Saturday. Mom was still at work. No one was home, so I got naked in her bathroom. The television was on full volume, showing my favorite cartoons. In front of a steamed mirror, I stood for a long, long time. My face softened by the damp dust. I couldn't recognize if I was a girl with undeveloped breasts or if I was a boy. The chrysanthemum gel ejected, empty bottle. Water gushed out of a faucet like crystal tadpoles. Spewing into tiny islands, I saw a seraphic self dipped in paradise. No shame, not yet sinful. Curiosity tickled my chrysanthemum cheeks with its dagger tip. I could feel my body surrendering to physics, afloat. Before, I had only seen chrysanthemums in late springs. Never thought that my body could be a host of such beauty. Never knew such a possibility burying in me. Never felt so soft and of this earthly ocean. I always held my breath underwater, let the verdurous roots take their grounds on me like magic. Bubbles quaked on the surface. My eyes shut, and I let my chrysanthemum bloom to its fullest. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Jinhao. It was really, really lovely.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you a question about queer joy versus queer desire, or tragedy, I guess. And I think definitely growing up with a little bit of representation in movies sometimes, I think the way that queer love and desire was always depicted was as tragedy. And do you feel that writing about queer joy is something that is very radical and helps you write yourself into existence, as you were saying?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I've been thinking about joy a lot. I think we, as queer people, being forced into a narrative that we didn't want. And it was always about trauma and the impossibilities. And I think a language is there for us to make ourself a place where we can exist, no matter how small it is or how do I say, ephemeral it is, but we exist. And I want to bring that imagination to people, and I want to use language to heal and to enable others to be able to speak their own truth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should we open the floor to questions? If anyone has any questions, you can type them into the chat box. I thought I'd start with one of my own as people think of questions, and it's kind of about writing personal poems about desire, and how do you work out how much of yourself to protect in those poems, and to not kind of give yourself away completely and open up all those vulnerabilities, or do you choose to do that anyway?
Can you repeat that question again?
Oh, not so. So it's about writing personal poems that are very vulnerable, and do you choose to be very vulnerable and just open yourself up, or do you choose to sometimes protect yourself a bit and not reveal as much, or kind of put a bit of myth into the poem to make it less, I don't know, pastoral.
So,
Do you feel that's a
yeah, I think maybe yeah, the poems I've shared are kind of personal themes, but there's a lot of fictionalized aspects of it, and I think that's where, you know, the lyric eye comes in, where we get the freedom out of it, and which I find poetry is very queer that way, and it does. I think also I'm very adamant, sort of adamant about self-care as well. I think if you're not ready to write the poem, don't write it. You know, write it until you're ready, and or if you're not ready to read the poem, don't read it, because you know you don't want to re-traumatize yourself. And then find a place where you have a safety net, where you can feel safe, and then write the poem. Like the last poem, I struggled for years because there's obviously very intimate aspects of myself that I feel not comfortable, or I didn't have the language to talk about it yet. And then that's why I left it there. I didn't write until now, you know. That happened when I was a teenager. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really important, like, to always, or at least I feel like, to have a layer of protection in your writing, especially if you know it's something that's going to be published or read out. And I think, like, I can definitely understand like your hesitance around writing that sort of content, because I think when you delve into writing like more sexual stuff, especially as a queer person, like especially as Asian queer people, like we're already so fetishized that you sometimes do feel like you want to be intentional about what audience you're reading this to. Like, you know, there's certain things you would share with an audience like this that you wouldn't share in certain other spaces. Like, I think it's, yeah, I think that's a huge part of writing poetry. I think you have to be responsible in all part that you do to yourself and to your viewers.
Yeah, I guess when you write a poem, you don't have to really get yourself in a very vulnerable position. Though I suggest poets do get uncomfortable, though. You know, there's a difference there, you know. But if you're feeling uncomfortable, I think you're writing about the, you know, the right thing. That's what I tell my students usually. That's why I ask them never write me like, you know, their happy love poems, you know, things like that. You know, there's no tension to it. There's no, I don't know. I don't get seduced by their you know, picture perfect poems, I'll say. Yeah.
I think that's very fair. And like, I think the comment about self-care as well, from writing a poem and being aware of the audience and
Yeah,
who you're
I
reading.
think a lot of times poets thinking like writing poems are cathartic. I think it is a cathartic, but also just make sure that you don't re-traumatize yourself. That's very important. You know, you might need a therapist before you write that poem. You know what I mean? Like, you don't just go into it, because then you're free falling. That's dangerous, you know. And how much you're gonna sacrifice yourself for the art, I don't think that's worth it. What's worth it is you exist, you know, and we need you.
Oh, so Sophie's just asked, do you feel that there's a difference between picture perfect poems and joyful poems?
Okay, Nicholas.
Yeah, I'm trying to type. Oh, do you want me to answer right
Yeah,
now?
yeah, yes,
Oh,
please.
I think you just answered.
Well, I think what Sophie is saying is right, actually. I don't know what maybe Lady Red Eagle and Jinhao can also answer this. Do you write happy poems, or are your poems happy poems? Whether or not you intentionally you know, set out to write like, oh, a happy poem today on a Sunday.
I don't know. Yeah, I find it, for me, it's one of the challenges I put myself through writing poetry as well. Like, how do you imbue humor? Because I'm very envious of some poets who can do humor, you know, and they're really good at it. And I think Annie, you did one, didn't you? You're talking about the soft boy, and you sort of make fun of that idea when
Oh,
you're
yeah,
doing
that was
that.
yesterday.
Exactly. So I just, you know, that's you know, I think humor is important, and I think sometimes, yeah, maybe not too joyful, but humorous. Yeah.
Well, when I made that statement, when I said that, I was only saying, you know, maybe you know, creative writing students tend to easily ignore the aspect of like language and how language is used to execute what they want to write about in poems or in short pieces. So when they're happy, they're trying to write about happiness in boring ways. It's definitely a happy poem, but is it an intriguing poem? To me, not. Maybe writers are more inclined to using more creative way, more unusual ways to write about something they are not very comfortable with. Because usually they don't have the language specifically, you know, and accurately about that, and they have to like make things up. And sometimes, you know, they surprise themselves. Sometimes, you know, their little tricks don't work. You know, if they don't work, then, you know, revise. You know, this is what every one of us does, right? I guess. Yeah. So sorry, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think happiness is a lot harder to write.
Yeah.
Well, because like, because I agree. Like, I think happiness, especially queer happiness, is very complicated. So you just have to like really pay attention to what it is and allow it to be complicated. But I feel like, I don't know about you guys, I feel like when I write happy poems, people like them way more than when poems, like especially lesbians. They just love to like read about happy fembutch relationships, like they're obsessed with it. I feel like.
Well, we need them too, right? Yeah. But then how do we challenge that not being to sort of more heteronormativity kind of romantic relationship? Because sometimes that's not possible, right? Like, you know, when you're dating cross culture or cross borders, you know, how do you have that moment when you can be intimate with someone where you can only see the face through the Zoom, right? Or you don't even have internet, or, you know, well, in some places. I think people need to be aware of that. But anyway, I know like we can all gushing about that joyful moments, but it's a very, I think it's a very, you know, I don't know, kind of imaginary land almost, how we can make it real. But I'm not challenging you, but
like a poem that I've read that's happy all the way through. I think I don't know if you can think of any examples, because I'm coming up a bit blank myself.
Me too. I was thinking about too. I don't know.
I can. Well, what do you mean by happiness anyway? Do we mean contentment, fulfillment, totally at ease with oneself? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that Plums in the Icebox poem. That's pretty happy.
I can only think of Barry Oliver when we think about contentment.
Yeah. Happy is I like joy more. I think happiness is a bit too much. Joy is like a small thing, you know, you can eat a chocolate, you get a little joy, you know, but happy is kind of impossible. How can you be constantly happy? Can you? You know, we're human, we're real. So if the poem is as a person, how can that poem be constantly happy if we can't? Right. But we all have like different emotions, right? You go through it, nervousness, shyness, you know, happiness.
Yeah, it may be an interesting project idea to like commission a bunch of people to write about happiness.
Yeah, right.
And see what comes out.
Well, there is, yeah, anyway, yeah. Yeah. I'm interested in, can we ask questions about each other?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I'm interested, like Nicholas, you sort of read your poem about that kind of imagined wedding, right? An invitation. And also, I don't know, I'm not sure if your father can also read English as well. And how do you feel that he can't? So how does that sort of reflect?
Well, he knows what I do. He knows what I did. But it's not like, he's flipping the pages of my book. Even though, Crevasse was translated into Chinese. My mom did, flip the pages of the Chinese translation for a couple of times. Maybe, she wasn't very interested in that. No, so I admit that I'm sort of like exploiting my father a little bit. He besieged me. Sort of, used him as a trigger point, and then tap into the fictionalization, as what Jinhao said. But actually came out to like everyone. I had to, right, because it's on the news. But he's kind to me. He's a lovely guy. My partner, always shows up for dinner. So yeah, my family is very understanding and accepting, thank God. And yeah, so he wouldn't mind a thing at all.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't mind a thing at all.
Yeah,
even if he speaks English.
Right, that's nice. That's nice to know.
Yeah, I experienced a traumatic stage though, like 20 plus years ago already. There was that stage, but thank God that it happened much sooner than it could be, otherwise.
I have a quick question. I was wondering, because you both write in Chinese and English, right? No? Oh, you don't? Okay. Okay, well, you can both have answer as you want. But how does translation and especially Nicholas, your use of Chinese words in your poems, how does that affect your relationship to both Chinese and English? Do you feel like certain languages are more intimate or certain languages are more appropriate for certain topics?
I think it depends on the subject matter. And of course, I'm very aware of the kind of Chinese words or Cantonese slangs that I put into my poems, because once I use them, I will create a different layer, a different texture in my work. If I can also speak French, if I have French phrases in my work, my work would totally feel different. So I guess it depends on what I want to say, but I don't want to write every poem that way. It would be super gimmicky. But then I did try a little bit of things like that in my latest book, only because those poems are really about Hong Kong or Taiwan, or how I have this fantasy about settling in Taiwan. So, and I also wanted to create a kind of discomfort among readers who can only read English. Because oftentimes, I feel annoyed when I see another language in the English poem, and everyone tends to celebrate that kind of cultural mixture. So I'm kind of annoyed by that, because I absolutely don't know Spanish, German, French in that sense. So I want to create a kind of reverse, for those English readers to see how they feel, and yeah, kind of revenge, yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of a revenge, if I can pick up on that, I think one of probably the last poem I wrote, chrysanthemum, that word bothered me so much because I don't know how to spell it and I don't know how to pronounce it when I see the word. But it was also my sort of little queer revenge on the language, right? If I were, because English is, I learned English, right? It's not my mother tongue, so to speak. But I would like that to be the revenge as well. Like you create this word and you're gonna be forced to read that poem and then you're gonna read that word forcefully, right? But also then when you read more about the word, the sound comes in, you know, the chrysanthemum, the word itself has anthem in it, right? Then the music comes in, the rhythm comes in, then you started to appreciate the language more maybe. So that's where I think my poetics comes in. I don't necessarily force myself to use Chinese, though I can read and write. But to me, if the language is not sufficient, or if it's not there, like, because Chinese is a, you know, you have the visual aspects of the Chinese character, right? If that Chinese character and the sound doesn't work completely together with English, or English doesn't completely work with, like, I don't want to create hierarchy, you know, which language is better, but like, if they don't mingle together in terms of sound, then I don't think I would be happy with it. Or if it doesn't happy when, you know, then, you know, I won't use it. But I will use Chinese when, you know, English fail itself, you know. Yeah, I would. And then there are some poems I did write with Chinese in it, but that's just because, you know, I want to explore the language a little bit more. And then okay, look, so I think somebody asked about a question about the character Ju, like, you know, which I was earlier on saying, is it some sort of reference to body parts, right? The character itself, when you look into it, you know, the tiny little bit look like a asshole kind of thing, you know. And in Chinese slang, you know, we do call the back door kind of 菊花, right? The flower, chrysanthemum, really, instead of rosebud or whatever in the, you know, gay culture in English world. So that's my also querying the also like the, you know, when they see the title, you think about, oh, chrysanthemum, you know, Japanese aesthetic, but I'm totally go off tangent with that, you know, challenge them like with the first line, everything, you know, it's just not about it, you know, but that's my way of querying my poem.
So interesting. Yeah. I think we have another question as well that was asking, do we all dream in English or Chinese?
I don't think that's relevant, but yeah, relevant to our poems, is it? I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that's relevant.
I shout in Mandarin in my sleep, but maybe I don't feel like that's super relevant.
Yeah, to our topic, is it? Yeah, but Ray, how about you? Like, I think you write a lot of really sensual poems, and, you know, Lady Ray, you go, like, how do you explore that? Like, I'm really intrigued by that. Like,
sensuality. Yeah, I get that a lot.
yeah, you're quite good at it.
Thank you. To be honest, it kind of, it is something I manufacture, but it also comes quite naturally because a lot of the artists I'm influenced by, I'm influenced by a lot of like rap culture actually, and like artists like that. And so sexuality has always kind of been in my vocabulary creatively. And sometimes I write poems and they're not even supposed to be super sexy, and everyone's like, wow. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's, I'm very sex positive, and I think it's underrated language. I think people see it as either like pornography, or like, I think some people sometimes see it as like cheap to, you know, write a sexy poem because everyone's gonna love the sexy poem. I don't think that's true. It's actually hard to write good like sexy poems. It's hard to write good porn if we're being real. Like, and there's a lot of room to play with. And I think it's also just like, it's just, I think it's a fundamental part of people's relationships to language. Ooh, my camera. That people pretend isn't there, but it is there. Like, reading poems is a very intimate experience. Listening to poems is a very intimate experience. I think it's weird that everyone kind of pretends that it's this like always this really like professional, civilized thing when, like, is it? Yeah. What about you guys? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I would definitely want to explore a little bit more, you know, since I'm heading towards there, I think. Well, I recently read a poem from 14 Poem. It's like a, you know, anthology for all queer people. And if there are poets in the chat, submit to them, you know, and they're really open to all poets around the world. So if you're queer, and then you can submit to them. Non-paid shout out, but yeah, yeah, they just very writing it such way, using plain language, really, just very, but it's so beautiful. Yeah, I admire to that. I would like to write more sexy poems, you know, just to tickle people's brain with my words. That sounds really lovely, I think.
Yeah.
I think Minion in the chat just asked a question about how you approach representing other people in your poems and how you might protect the people in your lives and our communities. Because I guess it does open people up to quite a wide readership that's not necessarily Asian and or queer.
I'm definitely careful when I write about, especially anything that references my partner, or like people would assume references my partner, even if it doesn't actually. Like I'm very particular, like again, talking about like the kind of sexual content, I'm very particular in, like, I'm okay with exposing some things about myself. I'm not gonna like put all their stuff out there for everyone to see. And I try to make sure when I write about someone that they've read it before I let anyone else read it, because I do think I think it's quite violating to allow other people to read something about someone if they themselves haven't written it. But the exception is if it's like a shady poem. Ah! and then I just keep it like obscure enough that no one could guess who it is. Like you know, and I often like I will like kind of like dip that into like a myth or something, so it's like quite well concealed. All right, you guys.
Oh, you muted.
Yeah. Do you mean the question of representation?
How do you protect people in your life?
Well,
Right.
I don't usually write about those, you know, communities as dangerous. It's hard, right? I don't know, I have a second thought about, you know, the role of poetry lately. You know, do we actually make the world better, you know, if we write poems about like minorities or, you know, wars and things? Of course, you know, it's a different issue if we encourage people to write their stories and they speak for themselves. So I'd rather you know, spending energy on, you know, helping people to express themselves in a more crafted way than simply wanting to write about them because they are being constantly discussed, you know, in politics and in media. It's not what good art comes from. You know, it's not.
Yeah, I would agree with Nicholas. I think me too, always champion people should write poems, you know, they should write in their voice, and, you know, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad, you know, if you write a poem about it, you know, then you have something there. I think it's very empowering using the language to make yourself exist. That's very much my thing. And I don't try to represent anybody, but through the lens of my own experience. I don't want to represent people, even though I identify as non-binary. It's only my own experience, because all non-binary people have very, you know, wide range of experience, how they identify themselves, and that's only, and the sexuality and gender is only part of, you know, us, and we have you know, families and, you know, and strangers to say hello to. You know, there are a lot of people in our lives that I think that matters more. You know, there are more urgent matters. Yeah, but I don't try to represent anybody.
I think there's been a question about other poets that you like reading who write about sensuality really well, and just book recommendations.
Gosh.
Mm,
Because I'm gonna be this ass liquor. I think Litera's Home by Jennifer Wong. You guys should definitely buy the book. It's published by Nicholas Wong, and she's the organizer of this festival, and I'm very, very grateful she has put all the poets together talking about various topics. I think I know it's about desires, and there's a lot of desire about longing for home, longing, like desires about wanting to be a mother and what's it like to be a mother. There's a lot of things, you can always connect it to that. And then I think writing poems should be, don't think about your representing, but also I think the specificity will eventually become universal. I think I got asked that question before, where they talk about why you guys are looking for books.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at my
yeah. And they were talking about the universality with the individuality, isn't it? Like, I think, we all drink a cup of tea, but what does that tea, the tea itself is universal, but the tea that your lovers, your family made you is very specific, right? We all have to, but then writing about your own experience of drinking tea also will evoke that universality, in your poem. So I think just write about whatever you want to write about, and don't be afraid.
I like this.
Ooh, is a sexy one. Yes.
My lover is a woman. It's good. It's very good.
Yeah.
Erica Jong. I like Anne Carson. I critically enjoy Allen Ginsberg. Those are probably like my big my big ones right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just typed Xiaoyu's name in the chat. It's difficult because I constantly get blocked by the label, sensuality there. When I thought I have a choice, but then when I try to recall what I have read, is really sensual or not, then I say, oh, maybe not. But then I really like the translation of the Taiwanese poet, female poet Xiaoyu. It's really interesting in terms of the language experimentation there. What about guys? Jinhao, do you have a poet to recommend?
Do I?
I don't know. Suddenly get blocked. I don't know why.
Me too. Well, I recently bought this anthology. I'm sure there's some sexy poem in this. It's called Queer Poets of Color. I'm quite looking forward to read it. And I don't know. I read widely, but it's very hard for me to come across with a sexy one. At least now I'm blank. But
I guess sensuality is a sentiment, right? It's not about like how erotic, how revealing things can be. Sometimes it's a sexy poem, but no body parts could be mentioned at all. So in that sense, I think I really like the Asian American poet Rick Barrett.
Oh, okay. Chen Chen is a good poet. He writes very good. Chen Chen is really good. Yeah, Chen Chen writes. If you want a very like daring, happy poem, Chen Chen writes a lot of happy poems. He has a lot of happy poems.
Really,
Yeah,
I don't think
he
his
was my
poems are all that
inspiration
happy.
for like happiness.
Well, in disguise. I think the language he used is very happy, but there's a lot of struggle.
Yeah.
Obviously. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
he definitely makes fun of himself a lot.
Yeah, joy.
Yeah.
I would say I put on a smile when I read the poem of his. Yeah, Chen Chen is really good. But yeah, I don't just read poems. No, I just read widely, watch films and then movies. Experience life. What else? Yeah. Any more questions, or should we? What do you think?
I think that's a good question to close on, perhaps.
Yeah.
If we have no more questions. And thank you all so much for reading You're all amazing, and I hope everyone in the audience has a really lovely rest of the day.